Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Richie from Boston. Today is the 14th of February, 2026, and you need to expect that any day now we will be attacking Iran, meaning Israel will be attacking Iran and forcing the United States military to attack Iran, because if they don't, they'll force the release of the rest of the Epstein files, which will show you exactly how many of these people are exactly what we've been telling you about for a couple of decades now. Now people are finally paying attention, and what gets me the most is they're like, where are the arrests? There won't be any arrest. There won't be any arrest. Nobody of consequence will get arrested. They'll throw a few bones here and there to make it look like they're actually delivering justice, but they won't be. Look at that. Guess what I was doing today? Yep, working on my truck. That's the exact same thing that the mainstream keeps showing of Trump. So whatever Trump has, I have it too, but I had it first, I think. But whatever. At any rate, let's get into this, shall we? But before we get into this, let me remind you one more time to turn your IRA or 401k, all the money, ones and zeros you have in the bank, into actual gold and silver. You're not buying gold. You're exchanging your useless ones and zeros in the bank that they're not going to give to you anyways for actual gold and silver. And this year they're doing, or for the 250th anniversary, they're doing a huge additional silver giveaway, up to 20 or 30,000, I believe. So you might want to get on this while you still can, because they're going to take your retirement, period. It's always been the plan. And 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗶 is going to explain it in so many more words than I have, but you'll understand that this is not just smoke and mirrors. Get your money out of the bank, have them send the gold to your house. Here we go.
I think it's quite clear that the way to force onboarding of the CBDC or this type of digital currency system is going to be some sort of crisis, some sort of event. I think the immigration crises, any sort of refugee situation, that's going to be used to push for digital IDs. I think it's just a very easy excuse for them, a way for them to quickly manufacture consent. Because, all these people, we don't know who they are. They could be criminals. They could be anybody. We have to know who everybody is. And it's going to be sold as a way to provide security to the insecurity created by the migrant crisis. So I think there's been growing awareness for some time that there's a lot of bipartisan consensus about most of the policies of the US government, like endless war, for example. And some people refer to it as the 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗶. But people also forget that too. And so what a lot of people call this the two-party model, people refer to it sometimes as the left-right paradigm. But I think not a lot of people truly understand how that paradigm works. If you think about it as the left hand and right hand of the establishment, you'll have one of those hands create a problem intentionally. And then the opposing hand comes in and offers the solution. But the solution was always what the establishment wanted, but it's sold as a solution to a problem created by the other side. So it creates the illusion that the opposing force solved a problem, but in reality, the problem was manufactured by one hand of the system, and then the solution was offered by the other hand. The man that claims to have created CBDCs is a man from Barbados named 𝗦𝗏𝗍𝗍. He created one of the first, well, arguably the first CBDC project in the Caribbean, and then went on to have a key role in creating the Nigerian CBDC, the 𝗍_Naira. So the way the CBDC in Nigeria was set up is that in order to access the CBDC, you have to have a national identification number, which is the Nigerian digital ID project. So you have to have a digital ID in order to be able to access the Nigerian CBDC. And the way they tried to get people to onboard to the CBD system was by essentially cutting off the vast majority of the cash in circulation in Nigeria.
So you heard what Whitney said in so many words. They're going to just keep crushing it till there's no more cash. Cash is too inconvenient. Cash isn't safe. And people aren't going to buy it. Not everybody. So what they're going to do, like I've been telling you for a couple of years now, is they're going to do an event. Something to do with migrants, where they need to have you on a digital ID, or you can't access anything, whatever. This video is going to be too long. I need a few points. I got to get a few points across real quick. And I'll leave the rest of that interview with her at the end of the video if you want to watch it. But they're going to force, well, she explains it. She explains it in the entire video. They're already hacking banks, Russian hackers, even though they're working with the Russians to do the digital ID in one world currency. You see what I'm saying? I don't like how she always talks about bipartisan and left hand and right hand. There is no politics. It's a gang that's taken over quite a long time ago. I think probably before I was even born, but I guess if I had to give it a starting point, I'd say the day they blew Kennedy's head off in front of everybody for the entire world to see was probably the starting point. But this has been on my mind. I don't know if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but look at this. Remember the lighting ceremony at the Winter Olympics?
It's a functioning machine, it's called it, and it's going to perform, if you will, for visitors throughout the games.
The two cauldrons lighting up the sky.
First thing that came to mind was this. Do you remember the old days? The eyes are the window to the soul. And that's a fact. That one statement, the eyes are the windows to the soul, is bigger than we even understand, because we've been dumbed down so badly. It's sad. But the first thing that came to mind when I saw that was this.
So this is our beautiful new flagship in West Hollywood.
It's stepping into the future.
This is the orb. It looks very cool, but it's basically just a fancy camera that's able to look at you and tell whether you're a real human or not.
You heard that right. In a world of deepfakes and online bots snagging the best deals, this shiny chromed white ball or camera could help prove that you're a human. That's the concept behind World, an open infrastructure co-founded by Sam Altman.
As soon as you see the actor playing the CEO of OpenAI, wanting to literally he wants to pay you to put your eye on this ball that's going to suck the humanity out of you so that you can prove you're a real person. The only reason you have to prove you're a real person is because people like this even exist. Do you see what I'm saying? Some people like to call them the supposed powers that be. I'll tell you a secret. I've been around a long time. They're the powers that be. No one's ever going to get arrested off the Epstein list. They've been doing this for time immemorial. And I got something that popped into my head and I can't get rid of it whatsoever at all. Things like this just come to me. I don't make videos unless something actually strikes a chord with me. I don't sit here and read to you articles, what Fox News or what MSN thinks. I've gone out of my way to avoid trying to get views. Certain channels aren't allowed to get views. Myself, Call for an Uprising, Face Like the Sun, any other channel that got their main YouTube channel back, or their backups in my case, you're allowed to be on there because they're data farming, but you'll never see viral numbers ever. The only channels that are allowed to get any types of views aren't telling you anything of any consequence. They're repeating things. They're showing you things off of TikTok. They're reading articles to you, things of that nature. I've specifically not spoken about the Epstein list or Charlie Kirk. But this just came to me today. Just came to me, and I will do a larger video on it when I'm not at a rest stop. Charlie Kirk, Turning Point, is taking the place of the Epstein Island activities. Epstein's not dead. Epstein's wherever Epstein's at. We've already got aerial footage of him from his ranch in New Mexico that no one ever actually usually talks about because that would involve research, but I'll digress. But Turning Point is the perfect machine to keep the adrenochrome coming, because these people rely on it. They need the adrenochrome from children. I've told you this before with Aleister Crowley, 5 years and younger. 5-year-old boy is preferable. They use them in their magical occult rituals that are very well working. If you're my age and you're looking around, you can see that everyone's got a spell on them, and it cannot be broken. You can give them all sorts of information and they just can't see it. They don't want to see it because a spell's been cast, because that's what a show is. That's what Hollywood is. I told you this almost 20 years ago. I'll say it again. Hollywood, the stick from the holly tree, used to be used to make magic wands in ancient druid ceremonies, and it still stands to this day. Broadcasting. They're broadly casting a spell to you. Do you see what I'm saying? And there's a reason that the entire coven is in Hollywood and then spreads outward. But all of these people are down with this because these people don't want to die, because they're going to have to face judgment. You think you know the Bible? Well, they know the Bible a lot better than we do, and they're doing everything they can to get around judgment. And here's one I got for you real quick. I don't mean to say this, but I've met a lot of people over the last 6-7 months, and they're really solid people. They got a solid plan. They're good to go. They're awake on so many topics, but they're still engaging in fornication out of marriage. I've been straight. I've been celibate for like 8 years now, because I'm not trying to have a family and I'm not trying to spread my seed. So all I'm doing is fornicating for the sake of fornication. And then people that are Christians, that have got their stuff squared away, are drinking. You can drink wine, man. Jesus drank wine. Jesus turned water into wine. But drinking spirits, vodka, tequila, things of that nature, that's not the path. It's called spirits for a reason, because if you drink enough of it, it makes you into somebody that you're not normally. Spirits, it's there for a reason. It's all in the Word. The eye is the window to the soul. At any rate, Turning Point is the new Epstein Island. I'm telling you. I'm absolutely telling you. And it's not just based on a hunch. It all goes right back to Jessica Kirk. Is that her name? Erica Kirk, whatever it is. Whatever the name of that character is. She's got ties to the military. The military has ties to Epstein. It's been here before we were here. People are just starting to see it now. We've been talking about this before people even knew about the Epstein files. And we were talking about how these people literally traffic human beings, specifically children. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. I got a lot on my mind. It's been a long time since I made a video because my channel got hit, so I wasn't allowed. But here I am again. So let's get into the next one. I will expand on Turning Point.
And so despite the fact that they created these conditions to coerce people into using the CBDC, the populace resists. And that suggests that the idea of CBDCs being a tool for financial inclusion, the public doesn't seem to believe that, right? In Nigeria, these people that ostensibly suffer from this identity gap, that suffer from financial exclusion, don't want the financial inclusion that they're being offered by the CBDC. They don't see any real benefit. They see it as a tool of the state. And the state in Nigeria and in other African countries where, these sort of systems are being rolled out, the governments have abused these systems to go after journalists or other people and violate human rights and all sorts of things. So it's not a tool for increased human rights. It's not a tool for increased inclusion. It's inherently exclusionary, and it's a surveillance tool. So if Nigeria's tactic of, drastically reducing the amount of cash in circulation didn't work, then I think it's quite clear that the way to force onboarding of a CBDC is going to be some sort of crisis, some sort of event where people will be made an offer they can't refuse, essentially. Whatever that crisis is that creates the situation where people will have, very little choice but to onboard to this new digital currency system, it could manifest in a number of ways, but regardless of how it manifests, what the narrative is going to be is that privacy is dangerous, anonymity is dangerous, specifically financial privacy is dangerous. Those are going to be the narratives that come out of this event, and that's going to be a way to force onboarding both onto digital currency that can be tracked to stop terror financing or things of that nature. And also we have to know who everybody online is, or we have to know who everybody is interacting with these systems. We need digital ID. It's very much tied up with efforts to regulate the internet. The effort to regulate the internet, specifically in the United States, has been going on for years. Under the Obama administration, they called it the driver's license for the internet. The idea is to have a government-issued ID be necessary for you to access the internet. And in doing so, they know not just what you're posting and saying online, they know what information you're reading online as well. But the difference is, once it's directly connected to a government-issued ID, they could prosecute you for things like publishing misinformation and all of that. And there's actually been pushes from people like former Google CEO Eric Schmidt to punish people who publish alleged disinformation, and that it's necessary to have IDs connected to social media accounts and to people's internet access as a means of facilitating those kinds of arrests or, law enforcement activity. Well, there's a couple of reasons why I think they'd want to have private banks have like a major role in this digital currency system to come. If there's a private sector entity banking you and managing your money, it's much easier for them to bank you than the federal government. So for example, if the Federal Reserve were to do a direct issue CBDC, it would be harder for them to freeze someone's bank account or debank them in any sort of significant way, as opposed to a private company where you have, for example, precedents where JP Morgan Chase, for example, debanked Dr. 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗆 and some of his executives and didn't give any reason as to why. They just said, we can no longer provide you with financial services. No questions asked. That would be very hard to do in the case of a direct issued CBDC. This is something similar to the argument that's been made for social media companies censoring. They say, oh, but they're private companies, so they can restrict speech however they want. But we know now that their restrictions on private speech have been a result of public sector pressure. So again, people need to keep in mind that this is a public-private partnership. That's the prevailing model in the United States. The digital dollar in the United States is also going to be a public-private model. You'll have the Fed, the central bank, working with the private banks that own the Fed in the United States. And that will be the partnership between them will be the system. It's not going to be all public. It's not going to be all private. It is a partnership. If you're using these existing dollar-pegged stablecoins, those are already here. They're already on blockchains. And a lot of those phases that would take the Fed a few years have already been accomplished if you choose to use those. And if you regulate them so that they have to keep their reserves at the Fed, then you're able to sort of have the same kind of system, but you don't have to go through the process of creating a direct issued CBDC. China, for example, they already have their CBDC. So the US is behind. So to remain competitive, they say, and have a first mover advantage, we should go with the digital dollars that are already here. So that's dollar-pegged stablecoins. The banks that are involved in this new system, it's very unlikely it's going to be the existing banks we have in the US right now. And that's because just like in 2008 and more recently with the Silicon Valley banking crisis, every time there's a major financial crisis, there seems to be a major bank consolidation wave. And you have Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, saying during the Silicon Valley bank crisis, in front of Congress, that they're essentially only going to rescue systemically important banks, which is a designator that Yellen can just, she essentially decides who's a bank worth saving and who's not. And this is sort of the perpetuation of the too big to fail model that we heard about in 2008. So one indication this system is being rolled out in this way is looking at the people developing the infrastructure and what type of digital currencies they're supporting. So one of the biggest developers right now of CBDCs is this company called R3 that's backed by some of the biggest Wall Street banks in the world. And they were named by Central Banking Magazine as the CBDC Partner of the Year last year. And then they're developing a litany of CBDCs for countries all around the world. That's just one part of what they do. They have this thing they call a digital currency accelerator. And the three types of digital currencies R3 develops are CBDCs, stable coins, and tokenized deposit tokens. And some banks in the US have already rolled out deposit tokens. Citigroup, JP Morgan. JP Morgan actually had a research paper out last year about how CBDCs are inferior to deposit tokens and how deposit tokens are better. So Oliver Gale, who defines himself as the founder of CBDCs, has more recently co-founded a company called Fluent Finance. What Fluent Finance is, they attempt to create a trustworthy dollar-pegged stablecoin that they call US Plus. And it's sort of framed as an answer to dollar-pegged stablecoins like Tether that have been controversial for having opaque reserves. So the whole thing about US Plus is having trackable reserves in real time and all of this. And so it's an attempt to create a very extremely trustworthy and backed by a consortium of banks, a bank-led US dollar peg stablecoin. So if the inventor of CBDCs is moving into stablecoins, he probably knows that there's something there. So one thing that gets overlooked a lot with 𝗙𝗲𝗍𝗍 and some of these other related simulations about coming cyber attacks is that they seem to involve the big banks. And some of them even involve central banks. There's a major theme of banking here, which I think has been unfortunately overlooked, and it sort of implies that one of these cyber attacks of the cyber pandemic will be on the financial system to some degree. So for example, if you look at 𝗙𝗲𝗍𝗍, it was the 𝗦𝗵, but it was done in partnership with Russia's largest bank, 𝗻𝗏, and was one of the opening speakers of it was the Russian prime minister, things like that, which is in direct contrast, for example, to the supposed Russian hacker narrative that's been propagated extensively in U.S. mainstream media. The U.S. government had no problem and no criticism participating in 𝗙𝗲𝗍𝗍 and no criticism of the 𝗦𝗵 for co-hosting their cyber attack simulation with the supposed hackers at large that supposedly interfered in the U.S. elections.
They said that they did that?
Well, okay, so in 2016 and 2020, there were a lot of narratives propagated by U.S. mainstream media about Russian hackers, and none of those mainstream media outlets criticized the 𝗦𝗵 for doing their big cyber attack simulation in partnership with the Russian government.
Oh, they did it with the Russian government?
Yeah, 𝗙𝗲𝗍𝗍 was the 𝗦𝗵 and subsidiary of 𝗻𝗏, Russia's largest privately owned bank, and also the Russian prime minister gave like the opening remarks, and it was affiliated to some degree with the Russian government, yeah. So there's been a few entities besides the 𝗦𝗵 that have sort of gamed out these cyber attack simulations in a very significant way. One of them is the Financial Services ISAC, or Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which is essentially the biggest private banks in the United States coming together to share information and plan shared responses to potential crises, including a cyber attack on the financial system. And FS ISAC is affiliated to an extent with the 𝗦𝗵 and also with the Carnegie Endowment. And the Carnegie Endowment has similarly charted out potential solutions if and when there is a major cyber attack on the financial system, and they did so in partnership with the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and some of the biggest private banks in the world like JP Chase. Their proposed solution is to merge banks, banking regulators, and intelligence agencies as far as information sharing and analysis goes. So that's essentially having banks share your private transaction data directly with the CIA or any other U.S. intelligence agency that asks.
Just kind of like a digital fusion center, an updated version of it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Doing so is inherently unconstitutional. People would not consent to that if it were not for a major crisis that affects the banking sector. Oftentimes they try and pilot these solutions before they're actually implemented, and if there isn't sufficient onboarding or uptake by the public, invariably an event comes along that creates fear and panic among the public to a very significant degree, and they begin clamoring for solutions to this problem that's causing the fear and panic, and the solution is often something that's been tested or pitched years prior.